Today we're going to look at the discriminant, which is part of the quadratic formula. So the discriminant is part of the quadratic formula. It's the part that's underneath the square root sign, which is this b squared minus 4ac. And we use that to determine the number and the type of solutions that we have. Remember, those solutions represent our x-intercepts or our roots, or we can call those our zeros. Now, to use the discriminant to determine those types of solutions, remember our equation has to be written in standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So determining our value of our discriminant is going to tell us what type of solutions we have, which tells us what our parabola would look like when we graph it. Remember, a parabola is this U shape here, which is what we get when we graph a quadratic equation. So if we plug in our a, b, and c into our discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac, and we get a number that's bigger than 0, if we get a positive number, that means that we're going to have two real solutions. Every single time, if that number's positive, we're going to have two real solutions, which means that when we graph our parabola, notice we're going to cross that x-axis two different times. So remember, it's going to open up if the a value is positive, and then it opens down if the a value is negative. Now, if that discriminant is 0, if that b squared minus 4ac, and we get 0 when we plug that in, that means we only have one real solution. Every single time, if the discriminant is 0, that means you're going to have one real solution, which means that that parabola is only going to touch the x-axis one time. So one more time, remember, if the a is a positive value, that graph is going to open up. If a is a negative value, that means it's flipped, which means it turns upside down. So the last possibility is if your discriminant ends up being a negative number. If it's some number that's less than 0, a negative number. If that happens and your discriminant is negative, that means that there's no real solutions, which means you have two imaginary solutions. Every single time that discriminant is a negative number, that means you have two imaginary solutions, which notice means that you're not even touching that x-axis. But same thing, if a is positive, it still opens up. If a is negative, it's flipped. But notice it doesn't touch your x-axis at all. Okay, so this is just a reminder of what we've been working on, which is the quadratic formula. So our formula, one more time, is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. But remember, that only works when your equation is in standard form. So ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Your equation has to be set equal to 0. Now notice when we look at this part right here that's underneath your square root, the b squared minus 4ac, this is the part that's called the discriminant. That's what we're going to look at for the next few days. That's the part that tells you how many solutions you have and whether those solutions are real or imaginary. So these are just the directions for the next few that we're going to look at. So it says find the discriminant. Remember, the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. Find the discriminant of the following problems and state the nature and number of solutions. After we do that, we're also going to talk about the graphs just a little bit. Okay, so our first example here, we have x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 0. So it asks us to find the discriminant and the number of solutions. Then we're going to do a rough sketch. So our discriminant is our b squared minus 4ac. So first off, our equation is set equal to 0, so that's good. So our a is going to be 1 because it's in front of x squared. Our b is in front of x, so negative 8. And our c is our constant, which is 16. Okay, and then we're just going to fill in. So b squared, so our b is negative 8, squared's from the formula, minus 4 times our a value, which is 1, times our c value, which is 16. So now we're just going to simplify here. So we're going to start with the negative 8 squared. So negative 8 squared, negative 8 times negative 8 is positive 64. Then we're going to look at the second part. Remember this minus 4 we use as negative 4. So negative 4 times 1 times 16, which is negative 64. Then 64 minus 64 is 0. So that's our discriminant. Now, if you go back and look at your chart, that says that if the discriminant is equal to 0, that means we're going to have one real solution. Okay, so this is our first part. Our discriminant is equal to 0, and we have one real solution. So that means if we were talking about what the graph would look like, first off, our A value is a positive number, which means our graph's going to open up. And that just means that it will hit somewhere on the x-axis just one time. So our graph would look something similar to that. Okay, so second example, we have negative 5x squared plus x plus 1 equals 0. So once again, it's set equal to 0, and we're trying to find our discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac. So a is going to be the number in front of x squared, which is negative 5. B is the number in front of x, which in this case is going to be positive 1. C's your constant, what you add to it, which is also positive 1. So we're going to plug into the formula. So b squared, so our b is 1. Squared comes from the formula, minus 4 times our a value, which is negative 5, times our c value, which is positive 1. So now we're going to simplify. So 1 squared. 1 times 1 is 1. Then we're going to multiply this over here. So once again, this is negative 4 times negative 5 times positive 1. So that's positive 20. And 1 plus 20 is 21. So now same thing, you're going to go back and you're going to look at your chart and say, well, what does that mean as far as the number of solutions? Well, our discriminant is a positive number. So if you look across from that, every time that the discriminant is positive, that means you have two real solutions. So our discriminant is 21. Since it's positive, that means we have two real solutions. So now as far as the sketch goes, the graph, that means that your graph is going to cross the x-axis 2 different times. Well, our a value up here is negative though, so that means it's going to be flipped upside down. And since we have two real solutions, we're just going to cross the x-axis 2 times. Now, I don't know if that's where it is. That just kind of gives us an idea that it's going to be flipped upside down and it's going to cross twice. So last example, we have 8x squared plus 8x plus 3 equals 0. So once again, it's set equal to 0, which is good. We're trying to find our discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac. So a is the number in front of x squared, which is 8. B is the number in front of x, which is also 8. And c is your constant, which is 3. So now we're just going to fill in. So b squared minus 4ac. So b, our b value is 8. Squared comes from the formula, minus 4 times our a value, which is 8, times our c value, which is 3. Okay, now we're going to simplify. So 8 squared, 8 times 8 is 64. Then we're going to multiply over here. So negative 4 times 8 times 3, which is negative 96. And then 64 minus 96 is negative 32. So our discriminant is negative 32. So once again, you're going to go back and you're going to look at the chart. And since our discriminant is negative, if you look across from that, every time the discriminant is negative, that means you have two imaginary solutions. That's our I. Two imaginary solutions, no real solutions. So now as far as our graph, that just means since our discriminant is negative, that means it doesn't touch the x-axis at all. And our a here is positive. So that means it's going to be opening up somewhere, and notice it doesn't even touch the x-axis.